Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to be coloring in the traditional sketch of Lonan from my books. I'm going to be super upfront when I say I'm not super happy with the final product for a couple reasons, but overall I think it turned out okay. Again, for those of you who randomly stumbled upon this video, I'm not an artist, so excuse my really bad techniques. These speed paints are actually just something I do for fun, so I'm happy they're being received so well with everybody. It was a little bit of a struggle, honestly, to draw Lonan. He's always had this face that I've never been able to capture, so drawing this wasn't super easy. A lot of the proportions were really wrong, which I fixed throughout this video, but even when they were okay, I still had difficulty with this drawing. I just want to make clear, the reason why I'm doing this series on portraits is so I can actually practice my realistic portraits and my drawing in general. I only started to learn how to draw last summer, and this year I decided to actually pick up drawing again so I could practice it for my art class, which I'm taking because it's torturous to not know how to draw in an art class. But that's my whole point in doing this series. It's not actually to really showcase my art, it's just to practice, and coloring them in is just something I do for fun, and I thought it would be fun if I shared this with my followers on my blog. So if you're not aware, I do have a blog. It's a writing blog that I document my writing journey on. I sometimes post tips and tricks on there. If you're into that sort of thing, all of the links to my blog are in the description box. So I thought, hey, I'm gonna learn how to draw realistic portraits, why not draw people that look like my characters? The reason why drawing Lonan was pretty difficult for me was because I didn't have a set reference. I used Dylan Manette for his reference because Dylan looks a lot like Lonan, and that's actually how I found Dylan. I found him through surfing pictures for someone who would look like Lonan, and then from there I found his band and stuff, and then all of this stuff came up and he blew up with 13 Reasons Why, which is amazing, but I couldn't really find a solid picture in an angle that I can draw. I really, at this moment, can only draw angles that are face on. I can't do anything if they're looking from like a different angle, if they're looking to the side, or even if their face is towards the camera but they're looking somewhere else. I still can't do that yet. So I'm just trying to practice the very basics, which is just a head-on portrait. So I couldn't really find perfect pictures of Dylan that fit what Lonan looks like, so I decided to incorporate a lot of Dylan's features. So this was a bit of a difficulty for me, and his nose was such a problem. This is one issue that I have with the entire painting, I think, is his nose wasn't as great as I wanted it to be. It didn't really turn out like I see Lonan's nose. It's really random to pick up on something like that, but his nose didn't turn out as well as I wanted it to because him and Dylan have similar nose shapes, but they're not the exact same, so I can really only copy pictures. So if I'm drawing one of my characters, the picture needs to look exactly like my character, or almost exactly, so I can just play around with some of the features very slightly in Photoshop, but if they're kind of different, especially in reference photos, then I'm not going to be able to draw it as well, which is fine. I'm learning. This was one of the earlier portraits I did. I know I'm uploading this video way after the other characters, but the most recent that I actually did was Reeve. Lonan was the first character of mine that I drew realistically, per se. So it was a bit of a struggle. It was probably my fourth realistic portrait ever in my entire life, so it was really hard to kind of nail down his face. Dylan also has kind of a difficult face to draw, which I like. He has a really unique face, so it's not really an issue to me, but I've always had a lot of trouble capturing his likeness in drawings. So yeah, I actually ended up using a screenshot from his movie that came out in the summer, Don't Breathe, for this because it had the expression that I wanted in the picture, but the issue with that is it wasn't a full headshot. It wasn't like Dylan looking straight into the camera, so I had a lot of issues trying to straighten out the photo so that he wasn't a little tilted, because in the picture his head is a little bit tilted, and then there's a shadow across a bit of his face, and that kind of skews his eyes. You'll notice Lonan has almost like two different eye shapes, and that's because Dylan's face in that picture is tilted a bit towards the camera, so it caused a bit of problems for me doing like a full-on headshot. Obviously, it's a huge goal of mine to learn how to draw more than just head-on portraits, but since art isn't something I'm pursuing, I'm taking it pretty slow and I'm just trying to learn the basics, which I think is pretty important when you're starting out. When I first started learning to draw, I actually didn't start with the basics. I started doing stylized stuff immediately, and I didn't realize that doing realism is so beneficial the first time around. So if someone random who's watching this video who's learning how to draw, like me, who can't really draw, I would highly recommend starting with realism. I know realism seems scary because it's like I have to capture that person's face in a picture and all of the shadows, and it just seems really scary because when you look at a really good realistic portrait, you're like, wow, that's super impressive. But I find it so much easier to copy than it is to immediately stylize. So yeah, I would highly recommend doing that to develop your skills instead. I've been rambling on for way too long, but anyway, that's just something I wanted to say. I did have a lot of difficulties with the sketch. He basically looks nothing like the sketch that I drew. Like, the mouth was way too big, and the eyes were way too small, and everything was too far apart. I'm still working on proportion. That's one of the bigger things that I want to work on. So Dylan's face was great to reference, but yeah, it wasn't really exactly what I needed in terms of reference. I really do need an exact picture to copy. If not, it's not gonna look that great. So you'll probably find random models online that look like my characters, and a lot of me, I guess it's my subconscious, tweaks as I'm going along so it looks like my characters and not like the model. But for the most part, they have to have very similar features, and it has to be a full-on headshot for me to be able to create a cohesive piece of art. So for example, if you saw my Harrison Speedpaint, Max from Bates Motel looks a lot like Harrison, but he doesn't look exactly like Harrison. I haven't found anybody who looks exactly like Harrison. Dylan looks almost exactly like Lonan, but I haven't been able to find like a full-on headshot of Dylan that looks exactly like Lonan. There's one picture that looks exactly like him, but he's looking off to the side, so I can't draw it just yet. But with Harrison, I was using a reference of younger Max, and it worked okay, but the sketch wasn't really, it was never meant to be Harrison, but I was looking at a reference photo of Max because I wanted to draw Max again. I drew Max in the summer, but it wasn't actually meant to be Harrison. The issue I had there was that I had to make up a lot, and it's difficult when you go from drawing stick people to drawing realistic portraits, or semi-realistic is a bit more accurate to say. It's kind of a skill set jump, but I thought I would include this little ramble because I wanted to share my struggles. I'm not perfect at art. I guess people might think that that's like one of my strengths, and I guess it almost looks like it. A lot of people get this weird connotation about me that I like dragging my artwork and like I'm super negative about my skills and what I can and can't do, and I guess it almost comes across that way, like, oh my gosh, everything I create sucks. That's not what I'm trying to put across. I don't think that way. I'm not somebody who drags everything I do. I have a set amount of confidence in everything I do. I'm just trying to keep it real here. Like, art is not a strength of mine. People who genuinely think that they can't draw always look at me funny when I say I can't draw, because they're like, what do you mean you created that? It's kind of difficult. I guess an artist or a person learning to draw might understand this. It's kind of difficult to say, hey, I'm an artist when you really don't feel like one. Even if I can complete something, like if I can copy a portrait, it doesn't really mean that I'm great at copying portraits. So yeah, I think there's a huge learning curve in learning to draw, but it's super fun for me. I love doing these portraits so much, and obviously I'm gonna branch out into different phases. Right now I've been basically drawing the same race and it's like very basic faces. Not to say that Dylan has a basic face, he has a very difficult face, basically why the drawing looks nothing like Dylan in the end, or to say that any of the other models that I was using as reference have basic faces. They don't at all. I think they have great faces, but what I mean is, like, I haven't really branched off into like any different sort of body modifiers and tattoos and piercings and different races. I'd really like to branch off into that. I have a very diverse cast of characters. I'd really like to represent them a lot more in my artwork, but it's just I don't think I have that skill set just yet. yet because I think doing that is a lot more difficult. It's something that's a little bit out of my range. I think it's important to practice though, so hopefully the next portrait I do can be of one of these characters because that's really exciting for me. And I'd love to showcase a lot more of that. I myself am a very diverse person. I'm a person of color, so I'd love to represent myself a bit more and other people of color in my art. I think that's super important. But yeah, if you want to learn more about my characters, they're all over my blog. I'll leave the link below again. Anyway, so back to the voiceover. I think I've rambled on for way too long. Basically, even when the proportions were okay with this drawing, I still had difficulty with it. Go figures, Lonan himself is kind of a difficult character. A little bit about him, he's probably the most no-chill character I write with. He's honestly a huge favorite of mine. He's a very logical character and is more inclined to believe facts than abstract ideas. Him and I are super different from each other in that way, but this is a main reason I really like writing him. Out of all of my characters, Lonan and I would share a favorite band. My favorite band is The Strokes, for any of you who don't know that. They're amazing, and I really think that if he were real, he'd like them as well, which is really fun imagining. A song I strongly associate with him is Two Kinds of Happiness by The Strokes, off of their 4th album, Angles. I love that song. Every single time I listen to it, it's like, oh my gosh, Lonan would love listening to this if he were here and driving down in a car with sunglasses and the sun's going down. I hope I'm not the only writer who imagines their characters like that, but yeah, I really associate that song with him. It's one of my favorites. I feel like Lonan's totally into like alternative rock and a lot of like the Beatles, you know, older rock bands and stuff. He would totally be into that. Like, I think we have a pretty similar music taste in terms of like rock, which is great. That song is basically him to a T. Lonan's definitely a huge favorite to write. Not a favorite to draw, but painting this was fun regardless. It took me around twice as long as my other speed paints. One thing I like about this drawing is his hair. I just like how it turned out. Funny enough, I used his hair as a metaphor of some sorts throughout the books. When we first meet Lonan, he's 19, his hair's buzzed down, and he's put together and stuff, and then we skip to book 5 and it's just long and his sanity is non-existent. That's kind of a weird one, but regardless, I also like how the actual coloring of his eyes went, so that's something I do like about this portrait. Overall, I like the painting, it just took forever to complete. I hope you guys enjoy this. I've been talking for way too long. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, I'll link my other character portraits in the description, and by now I think I have 2 up on this channel. I'd like to have more than 2 up in the future, so I'm going to start drawing my cast of characters from my other books because these aren't I have like so many other books beyond this and so many other characters, so I'd love to give them a shot as well. So yeah, that's it for this video. I'd love to see you guys in the next one. See you guys then!
To find your sister, she